If I had known that morning would end with scalding coffee on my lap and 65 years of dignity slipping down the tile floor, I would have stayed in bed. I would have pulled the covers up, turned away from the sun, and ignored the smell of fresh brew coming from the kitchen. But I didn't. I sat at the table like I always did, because I thought this house was still a home, because I thought my daughter still saw me as her mother, not a burden with a bank account. The spring light was gentle that morning in Spokane, pouring through the sheer curtains like it always did. I sat at Jessica's kitchen table, her minimalist Scandinavian-style kitchen, as she'd described it, hands wrapped around my old navy blue mug. The coffee was dark too strong, the way her late husband Greg used to like it. She brewed it the same even now. Habit or tribute, I never asked. Braden, my 17-year-old grandson, didn't look up from his phone when he spoke. "Grandma, can I use your credit card? There's a new gaming chair on sale. It's only like $5,000, $5,000. I didn't look up. I didn't scold. I didn't laugh. No, Braden. One word. Calm. Final. I kept sipping. Then came the sound, sharp, intentional. Clack! Jessica placed her cup down with enough force to make the spoon clink against the porcelain. When I finally looked up, her arms were folded, jaw set, eyes hard. "I told you already," she said, voice low, but edged like broken glass. "You can't just live here, use our water and power, eat our food, and then hoard your money like some miser. You're living under our roof." I stared at her. My daughter. The same little girl I once carried through a snowstorm wrapped in my coat. The one I spoon-fed soup when she had the flu. The one who used to whisper, "I love you" before bed, even when she was 12 and too grown up for it. "Jessica," I said gently, "I'm not hoarding anything. I just don't think anyone needs a $5,000 chair." I didn't finish the sentence, because that's when she did it. She walked over, not with rage, not in a rush. No shouting, just cold precision. And then she tipped the mug in my hand forward. Hot coffee, straight into my lap. I gasped and shot up the ceramic mug, crashing to the floor, splintering across the tile. The burn hit seconds later, searing through the thin fabric of my pajama pants. I grabbed a napkin with shaking fingers, dabbing at my thighs while trying not to cry out. Jessica didn't flinch, didn't even look sorry. "If you're not willing to help your family," she said coolly, "then maybe it's time you leave." My ears rang. My heart thudded. I bent slowly to pick up one of the shattered pieces of the mug. It had a small, faded sticker still stuck on it. "You matter." A gift from a young nurse on my retirement day. Across the kitchen, no one moved. Braden had already left, probably back to his room to game or scroll TikTok. Jessica was still standing there with her arms crossed like she was enforcing a company policy. No one asked if I was okay. I looked toward the kitchen window, needing air, something, anything. And I saw Mrs. Fletcher, the neighbor across the street, standing still behind her curtain. Frozen. Eyes wide. She had seen everything. Not just witnessed, but truly seen. It didn't matter. Jessica turned back to the sink, casually wiping the counter, as if we'd just had a minor disagreement about laundry. I stood there, clothes damp, legs throbbing, chest tight. Not from the pain of the burn, but from something worse, betrayal. Not anger, not even surprise. Just the weight of confirmation. She wanted me out. Not because she couldn't help me, but because I was no longer useful. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I walked back to my room in silence, and for the first time in years, I began to pack. Not because I was weak, not because I had nowhere to go, but because I no longer needed permission to exist. The bruise from the coffee faded within days. The damage it left behind didn't, because after that morning, everything changed. but no one said a word. Jessica didn't apologize. Braden didn't mention it. The kitchen returned to its carefully staged calm, but beneath it all, something had shifted. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was an inconvenience, a liability to manage. 2 days later, Jessica sat me down at the dining room table. Her tone was gentle rehearsed. She poured me tea like a nurse speaking to a particularly difficult patient. "I've been thinking," she said, sliding a stack of papers across the table, "we should go ahead and transfer some things to my name. You know, for convenience, in case anything happens again, like your heart surgery. It would make medical paperwork so much easier." I stared at the papers. Legalese, transfer of property, authorization to access my accounts. "Jessica." "I'm fine," I said softly. "I can handle my own records. I've done it for 70 years. She gave me that smile, the one that doesn't reach her eyes. "Mom, it's not about capability, it's about preparedness. Braden and I just want to help." I wanted to say no, to push the papers back and ask when help started sounding like a transaction. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I asked for time. "Let me look over them," I said. That night, I didn't sleep. Braden had started staying up later than usual. I heard the thump of bass-heavy music behind his closed door, the clack of mechanical keys, the occasional outburst of profanity. One afternoon, I walked past his room and saw him punching the wall. There was a dent already there, poorly patched over with spackle. I mentioned it to Jessica. She shrugged. "He's 17. It's a phase." "It's not just a phase," I said. "It's a pattern." She rolled her eyes. "You're always so dramatic." The next morning, while checking my email on the old iPad I kept hidden in my nightstand drawer, I saw it. A charge, $1,249.99 to a high-end electronics store I'd never visited. Then another, $637.42. Then one for a gaming subscription I'd never signed up for. I opened my banking app. Password invalid. I tried again. Still invalid. I checked my texts. My two-factor authentication had been rerouted to another number. My throat closed. I walked back into the kitchen and stood there for a long time staring at the counter. The same place I'd stood when she poured scalding coffee on me. That day hadn't been a moment of rage. It had been a message. I went to the closet and pulled out the small manila envelope I'd hidden in my suitcase. Inside were photocopies of my birth certificate insurance card and one sticky note with a phone number scribbled in my late husband's handwriting, Peter Callahan, 503XXX6, Greg's best friend, retired attorney, widowed. Last I heard, he was living in a cabin near Ashland, Oregon, surrounded by books and trout streams. The kind of man who still wrote thank you notes on linen paper. Greg once told me, "If you're ever stuck and I'm not here, call Peter. He doesn't make promises he won't keep." I hadn't spoken to him in years. But I dialed anyway. Margaret came, the warm, gravelly voice after the third ring. "Well, I'll be. How long's it been?" "Too long," I said. My voice cracked a little. "You okay?" I hesitated. "No," I said. "I'm not." We talked for nearly 20 minutes. I told him everything in broad strokes, enough to let him understand, not enough to make it sound like I was accusing my own daughter of theft. But Peter had always been good at reading the unspoken. "Didn't I tell you," he said gently, "not everyone who offers you shelter gives you peace?" I remembered those words. He'd said them when Jessica first offered for me to move in after my bypass surgery. "You said it like a joke," I replied. I meant it like a warning. Peter didn't press. He just said, "If you want help, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't leave a trail, I can be in Spokane in 3 days. You just say the word." "I'm not ready," I said. "But you're getting there." he answered. You called. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the dent on my thigh where the coffee had hit still faintly pink. I stared at the unsigned paperwork on the nightstand. I listened to Braden yelling at some stranger through his gaming headset. And I realized something chilling. This house wasn't mine. This family wasn't mine, not anymore. I had become an asset, one they were managing, but they didn't know me as well as they thought. They thought silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant I was planning. The morning I discovered my wallet was missing, I wasn't looking for it. I had just finished folding a week's worth of laundry and was slipping on my old cardigan when I remembered I needed my prescription ointment from the pharmacy. The little pharmacy around the corner was the one place I could go by myself without Jessica insisting on driving or helping. That morning, I wanted air silence and 5 minutes where I didn't feel like a guest in my own daughter's home. I reached into my purse, already picturing the red wallet with the faded gold clasp. It had belonged to Greg's mother, passed down to me during our first Christmas together. But when I opened the main pocket, there was nothing. No wallet. I unzipped every section, dumped the entire contents on the bed, peppermint wrappers, Kleenex lip balm. But no cards, no ID, no cash. I checked the drawer, then the coat closet, then the side table where I usually leave things when I get distracted. Still nothing. My chest started to tighten. Not the tightness of a heart episode, but the cold kind, the one that starts in your stomach and creeps up like a shadow. Jessica. I called down the hallway. Have you seen my wallet? She didn't answer for a moment. Then her voice drifted from the kitchen. You gave it to me, remember? After your surgery, you said it was easier for me to handle things. I gave you access, not ownership, I said, stepping into the hallway. I need it. She appeared in the doorway, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. Mom, please. You're just confused. Everything's already linked to my name. It's more efficient that way. I'm just helping you manage. That word again, manage, as if I were a client or a ticking bomb. I tried to breathe slowly. I didn't authorize you to change anything I said. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Well, someone had to take over. You were recovering. It made sense. She said it like she was explaining why she'd watered a dying plant, like she expected praise. I turned back into my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled out my phone. I called the bank. Not the one in town, the national line. A young man answered, too cheerful for the storm brewing inside me. I gave my name, birth date, social security number. Then he asked for the email on file. I told him. He hesitated. I'm sorry, ma'am. That's not the email we have listed. I blinked. Try margaretdelaney4@gmail.com. Another pause. No, I'm afraid that's not it either. I sat up straighter. Can you tell me what it is? I'm sorry, for security reasons. I interrupted, my voice sharper than I meant. I'm the account holder. I need to know what's happening. I can't confirm anything without two-factor authentication. It was recently updated. I didn't update anything. He paused again. Do you have access to the phone number ending in 3982? My mouth went dry. That wasn't my number. Not even close. That evening, I sat in the guest room with the blinds drawn, the lights off, and my phone in hand. I texted Peter with trembling fingers. They changed the info. I can't access anything. His reply came minutes later. I'm emailing you something. Read it. We need to act soon. 10 minutes later, a PDF landed in my inbox, a New York Times article. Title, When Helping Hurts the Rise of Elder Financial Guardianship Fraud. I read it once. Then again, children transferring assets. Bank accounts quietly moved. Email and phone credentials updated without consent. Victims labeled confused or fragile to justify control. Power of attorney forms signed under pressure. Temporary arrangements becoming permanent. It was like reading a biography I hadn't written but lived. Jessica's words echoed in my head. I'm just helping you manage. You gave it to me after surgery. It's more efficient this way. The worst part I had believed her. I had wanted to believe her. That it was all just logistics. That I was overthinking. That being tired and overwhelmed was a good enough reason to hand someone the keys to your life. But that night, sitting in the dark, I realized I hadn't handed her the keys. She had taken them. And worse, she'd changed the locks. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My identity, my accounts, my autonomy, they weren't just slipping away. They had been quietly repackaged, reassigned, and redistributed under the polite label of help. The next morning, when Jessica knocked on my door and asked if I was coming to breakfast, I said no. And for the first time since I moved into her house, I meant it. It started with my old iPad, the one Jessica said was too slow to bother with the one I'd tucked into the back of my nightstand drawer when Braden kept asking if he could use it for gaming. I hadn't touched it in months, but I still remembered the password, Greg 1947. My late husband's birth year. Some things muscle memory never forgets. The screen flickered to life, sluggish but dependable. I opened the email app linked to my original bank account, the one that, until recently, I thought was still mine. It took a few tries, but eventually I gained access. A part of me was hoping I'd overreacted, that I'd misread everything, that I'd find nothing more than grocery store charges, pharmacy purchases, and the occasional birthday card order for the grandkids. But what I saw made my fingers freeze over the screen. There they were, plain as day. A $2,199 charge from Electra Massage and Spa. Another for $1,377 Tech Hub Superstore. A $899 purchase labeled Braden Custom PC Parts. Then $3,062 from Relax Nest Furnishings. A $247.30 Apple Store charge, likely the new iPad I saw Braden unboxing 2 weeks ago. None of it was mine. None of it had my fingerprint, my consent, my voice. I scrolled further. Charges I couldn't recognize stacked up like bricks. Not just spending, but deliberate spending. Big items. Luxuries. Upgrades Jessica would probably call them. But the worst was yet to come. An email dated 3 months ago, subject line, home refinance, signature confirmation. It was from a loan officer at Crestline Mortgage Services confirming the final steps in a joint refinance agreement. 2 names were listed on the document, Margaret Delaney and Jessica Delaney. I clicked the attachment with shaking hands. There it was. The house I'd bought with Greg in 1984, back when interest rates were sky high, and our savings were just enough for a down payment. The house with the garden he built from scratch, where we celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, retirements. The house I'd signed over temporarily, I thought for medical ease during my bypass recovery. Now it had been refinanced under my name and Jessica's. Her signature looked neat. Mine looked off, like someone had traced it, stretched the loops, flattened the tail of my Y. It wasn't mine. Not really. I sat back feeling the breath leave my chest like a slow leak. She hadn't just taken my money. She had collateralized my past. I wasn't co-signing anymore. I was co-burdened. Somewhere upstairs, Braden shouted at his video game and slammed a door. Jessica's voice followed shortly after flat and distracted dinners in the fridge. I closed the iPad and placed it back in its drawer, but this time I didn't tuck it away. I left it out right on top. Not because I was careless. Because I was ready. I walked to my closet, pulled down the old hat box Greg had kept letters in. Inside, I found what I'd hidden away and nearly forgotten the original title to the house, tucked inside an envelope with our wedding photo. My name was the only one on it. Still. That was the crack of light I needed. In that moment, I wasn't confused. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't some old woman who couldn't remember her passwords. I was Margaret Ann Delaney, and I had proof. Proof that I still existed. Proof that they'd underestimated me. And this time, I wouldn't knock. I'd open the door from the inside and walk right out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even close it hard. I just pulled it shut behind me and waited for the click. No one chased after me. No one yelled from the upstairs window or came running down the driveway in fuzzy slippers and fake concern. And that was how I knew I wasn't leaving a home. I was leaving a holding cell. It was early, just after 6:30 a.m., when I wheeled my suitcase down the front steps, slow and quiet. The spring air was still cool, and the cherry blossoms lining Jessica's street were just beginning to bloom pink and soft, like they hadn't seen what happened behind those windows. I stood at the corner for a moment, waiting for the car I'd booked under a fake name to pull up. When it did, the driver didn't ask questions. 4 hours later, I stepped off the Greyhound in Ashland, Oregon, with nothing but a carry-on. My iPad, a small envelope of documents, and a phone filled with screenshots that would turn silence into proof. Peter Callahan was already waiting at the station. Same gray slacks, same soft cardigan, same easy calm that used to drive Greg mad back in the day. He didn't hug me. He just took my bag and said, "You look like hell. Let's fix that." His cabin was tucked into the woods outside town, warm and lined with old books and older whiskey. The kettle was already whistling when we stepped inside. I sat down on a soft brown chair that smelled like cedar and memory, and finally, I let my breath go. Peter poured 2 mugs of black tea, no sugar. Then he pulled out a yellow folder, thick with tabs and time. "I started putting this together the moment you called," he said, sliding it toward me. "It's not a formal case file, but it's a start. I pulled copies of your original will, the property deed, the original trust Greg set up in '96 before Braden was even born." I opened the folder slowly. Everything was there. Birth certificate, marriage license, the power of attorney forms I'd never signed, but apparently Jessica had referenced anyway. And then the deed, the real one. Mine. "I don't know how to fight her," I said, fingers trembling. "I don't even know if I have the strength." Peter sat back, crossed one leg over the other. "You don't have to fight her. You just have to tell the truth. Let the paper speak. You're not going to shout or plead. You're going to document. Quietly, completely, and legally." I nodded, but the fear still hovered. I let her do this. I handed her the keys. "No, Margaret," he said firmly. "You gave her trust. She stole power. That's not the same thing." He reached over to the stack of folders beside him and pulled out another name. "I want you to meet someone, Sarah Mullins. She's a younger attorney, sharp, ethical, and specializes in elder financial abuse. She's helped clients undo guardianships, recover stolen assets, even press charges when needed." I hesitated. "Won't she think I'm just another sad case? She'll think you're a survivor who finally stepped out of the fog. And she'll take you seriously." I've already spoken to her. That afternoon, Sarah joined us on Peter's sun porch. She was in her early 30s with a leather satchel slung over one shoulder and a quiet confidence that reminded me of the nurses I used to train. She didn't ask me to repeat the whole story. She listened while I showed her the emails, the bank statements, the signature I suspected was forged. After half an hour, she closed her notebook and said one sentence that lifted a weight off my chest. "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." We spent the rest of the day scanning documents. Every receipt, every login attempt, every charge Braden had made under my name. Peter had a fax machine that still worked, bless him, and Sarah called in a forensic specialist to review the refinance forms. She looked me in the eye before she left that evening and said, You're about to take your life back, Margaret, but it won't come in the form of an apology. It'll come in the form of legal weight. Later that night, I sat alone in Peter's guest room, the windows open, the air clean. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't afraid of the knock on the door. Because the next time it came, it wouldn't be someone demanding my silence. It would be justice, arriving with paperwork. The first thing I noticed about Riverstone Haven wasn't the manicured courtyard, or the koi pond, or the soft jazz that played just loud enough to fill the hallways without irritating the residents. It was the air. It smelled like lemon balm and fresh-baked bread. Not antiseptic, not resignation. It smelled like living. My new room was modest, a studio with a little balcony, a writing desk, and a worn but clean love seat in the corner. The move-in took less than 2 hours. Peter helped carry up my suitcase and the banker's box filled with documents. Sarah had already coordinated the financial paperwork with the director of the facility, making sure no signatures passed through anyone else's hands. When the final form was signed, the receptionist smiled at me and said, "Welcome, Ms. Delaney." It hit me like a gust of wind through a broken window. I hadn't heard my full name, Miss Delaney, in over 3 years. Not Mom, not Ma, not you. Not a sigh in the form of a name. Miss Delaney. Something inside me cracked. Not from pain, from recognition. I smiled, mouthed a thank you, and walked slowly down the hallway to my new room. I hadn't unpacked more than a sweater and a toothbrush when I heard a soft knock at the open door. "You must be the new one," a woman said, peeking in with a cautious grin. "I'm Anita." She looked to be in her late 60s, with silver hair swept into a loose bun and eyes that held something knowing, like she'd seen too much, but still chose to be kind. "I'm Margaret," I said. "Margaret Delaney." Anita stepped in like she already knew we'd be friends. She looked around the room, then at me. "Don't worry about the size," she said. "It's not about square footage. It's about peace per square inch." That made me laugh. The first real one in weeks. She invited me to join her in the lounge for afternoon tea. We sat on a pair of old rocking chairs with a view of the courtyard, watching 2 blue jays argue over a breadcrumb. I asked how long she'd been here. 2 years, she said, her voice even. "I used to be a high school principal in Eugene. Retired early, not by choice. My daughter wanted my house, claimed I was slipping, had a doctor friend write up a dementia concern. I spent 4 months in a psychiatric facility before a nurse figured out I was fine. Just inconvenient." My hands tightened around the mug of chamomile tea in my lap. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. She looked at me right in the eyes and added, "They don't always come with bruises, Margaret. Some children steal your future by managing your present." I was lucky. The system failed me, but the right stranger didn't. I blinked hard. Mine was named Peter. She smiled. Mine was Cheryl, a volunteer social worker with a loud voice and a clipboard. God bless clipboards. We laughed again, and then we fell into a silence that wasn't awkward. It was shared. Sacred. A space where we weren't alone. I told her about Jessica. Not everything, not yet, but enough. The coffee, the missing wallet, the refinance, the signature that wasn't mine. She didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "You're not broken. You're just breaking free." Later that evening, I returned to my room. The staff had left a small welcome basket, fruit tea bags, a lavender pillow spray. It wasn't much, but it felt like more than anything I'd received from Jessica in months. I sat on the edge of the bed, unzipped my suitcase, and started to fold my things into drawers, my drawers. I placed my old nurse's watch beside the bed and set Greg's photo on the dresser. When I finally lay down, I stared at the ceiling fan slowly spinning above me, listening to the soft hum of life happening outside my door. And I realized I didn't feel like a burden. I didn't feel like a problem. I felt seen. Not pitied, not dismissed, just seen. As a person, as a woman, as Ms. Delaney. That night, I slept with the balcony door open, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream of being trapped. I dreamed of walking through an open gate with no one following and no one in front. Just me, choosing where to go. I was in the library when the front desk called my room. The librarian, a kind woman named Celeste, had just handed me a large print mystery novel and a cup of lukewarm chamomile when the phone rang. Miss Delaney, the receptionist, said, her voice low but steady. "You have 2 visitors, a woman and a teenage boy. They say they're family." My stomach turned, but I didn't flinch. I didn't ask who. I already knew. "Would you like us to let them in?" she asked. "No," I said, standing slowly. "But you can let them know I'm watching." I moved quietly into the sunroom that overlooked the lobby. The tinted glass let me see out without being seen. From that vantage point, I saw her Jessica standing near the entryway, arms crossed, tapping her foot like she was waiting for a manager at a store she didn't like. She wore a red blouse too bright for the setting and jeans too tight for comfort. Behind her slouched Braden earbuds, dangling around his neck phone in hand scowl, already set into his young face like it had been carved there. Jessica said something to the receptionist, jabbing a finger toward the hallway that led to my room. The receptionist didn't budge. Instead, she pressed a button and calmly called security. It was surreal watching my daughter argue with a woman half her age who spoke with more grace and patience than Jessica ever offered me in that house. Then Jessica turned and pointed, straight toward the sunroom. She didn't know I was standing behind the glass. Didn't know I could see the way her mouth moved fast and frantic. Didn't know that every gesture, every twitch of frustration only reaffirmed why I left. Braden finally looked up. His eyes scanned the room and landed on me. We locked eyes. For a second, just a second, his face changed. Not shame, not love. Panic, because I wasn't gone, because I wasn't somewhere crying in a room, because I wasn't dead weight he could shake loose. I was upright, alive, looking back. He reached into his hoodie and pulled something out my red wallet, the one I'd searched for weeks ago, the one that had vanished without a trace. He walked closer to the window, our eyes still locked, and with a flick of his wrist, he tossed it. It hit the walkway just outside the door with a soft thud. No apology. No explanation. I didn't move. I didn't blink. From across the room, I watched a security guard, Doris, an older woman with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for drama, step forward. She exchanged a few firm words with Jessica. There was no shouting, just tension tight and sharp like a wire pulled to its breaking point. Jessica threw her arms up. Braden muttered something and turned away first good. "Let the boy lead for once." Jessica lingered a moment longer, her jaw clenched, and then she mouthed something. "Mom." I didn't move, didn't wave, didn't raise my hand. I stayed where I was, wrapped in stillness, wrapped in choice. Security ushered them both out. The glass doors closed behind them, soft and slow, like the punctuation at the end of a sentence I should have written years ago. I walked over to the entrance only after they were gone. The wallet was still there on the concrete. I bent down, picked it up. It was lighter than I remembered. I opened it. Empty. No ID, no cards, no cash. Just a lipstick I hadn't worn since Greg's funeral. I held it in my hand like a fossil. Something that used to be part of me, now hollow and meaningless. Then I walked back inside, shoulders square, chin level. As the automatic doors whispered shut behind me, I murmured to myself, low and clear, "Don't look back. There's nothing behind you worth turning for." And I didn't. By the time the dust had settled from Jessica and Braden's failed visit, Sarah had already filed the paperwork. It wasn't loud. It wasn't televised. No courtroom cameras. No drama. It started with a thick envelope dropped off at the county clerk's office, sealed tight with signatures and evidence. Then came the emails, the notarized affidavits, the highlighted bank statements, the screenshots of transactions made at 2:13 a.m. from an IP address in Jessica's home. Sarah had called it a quiet storm. The kind of legal motion that doesn't knock, it seeps under every door, fills every crevice. You don't feel it until it's already everywhere. The charges were clear and concrete: unauthorized access to financial accounts, falsified documentation in a home refinance agreement, elder financial exploitation under state statute 124.050. Braden, she added, was not just a kid who didn't know better. He'd initiated at least 4 direct PayPal transfers from my checking account to his own gaming platforms. The timestamps matched when I was recovering in the hospital after my surgery. He'd known I couldn't move, let alone log in. Sarah submitted everything to the local district attorney's office. Within a week, a temporary restraining order was issued, freezing all activity on the bank accounts where my name had been involved. A second order requested Jessica to formally return any liquid assets acquired using my name or property. That included the massage chair, the salon treatments, and most notably, the remaining funds from the refinanced mortgage on my house. The same house she had claimed she was managing for me. Peter called me the morning it all came through. His voice didn't sound triumphant. He wasn't gloating. It was gentler than that, like someone delivering news they knew you'd hoped for, but never dared to expect. "They froze her accounts, Margaret," he said. "Every last one tied to your name." I didn't speak at first. Then I whispered, "Did she know it was coming?" "No," he replied. "But she'll know now." And she did. The very next day, I received a letter from Jessica. Not handwritten typed, formal, polished. The kind of letter someone sends when they've been advised to appear civil. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit to anything, but she asked questions softly veiled as concerns. "Can we talk? Would you consider a mediated conversation? This has gone far enough, don't you think?" I folded the letter in half and tucked it under a stack of old church bulletins. I didn't rip it. I didn't frame it. I just let it exist in the space where it belonged beneath things that mattered. That same afternoon, I composed a letter of my own. No emotion, no accusation. Just a quiet piece of paper with one paragraph and one closing line: "Jessica, I didn't want this. I never wanted courts or paperwork or consequences. I just wanted to live in peace. You mistook my silence for surrender. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking distance. Please do not contact me again. Margaret." I didn't send it registered mail. I didn't care if she signed for it. I just mailed it and let the wind take the rest. Later that week, Sarah called to update me. The DA's office had confirmed an active review of the case. No charges yet, but enough evidence for further investigation. They'd even begun a forensic audit of the bank accounts Jessica had listed as joint for convenience. That phrase, "for convenience," had never sounded colder. I went back to my routine at Riverstone Haven. Reading with Anita in the afternoons. Watering the herbs by the courtyard. Small things. Quiet rituals that made my hands feel like mine again. And as I walked the halls, the staff still called me Ms. Delaney. No one asked me for a pin. No one said, "Just give it to me, I'll take care of it." I was still rebuilding, yes. But this time, I was doing it with paperwork and intention, not permission. And every form I signed, from that day forward, I signed with a hand that no longer trembled. The house on Pinehurst Lane had good bones. That's what Greg used to say every time the roof leaked or the pipes groaned in winter. Still solid, he'd mutter, hand on the wall, like he was checking for a pulse. And I'd nod, not because I knew anything about construction, but because he believed it. That house had stood through storms, birthdays 1,000 casserole dishes, and the silence that filled the hallway after he passed away. And now it was time to let it go. Not because I couldn't live there anymore, but because it was no longer mine in spirit, only in signature. And I didn't want it to be the anchor Jessica used to drag me back. Sarah helped me draw up the paperwork. Peter handled the title verification, which, despite Jessica's years of acting like she owned every square foot, still listed only my name. She had never legally transferred it. She didn't need to because she believed I wouldn't dare, but I dared. The real estate agent was professional discreet. She walked through the house without fanfare, noting the upgrades Jessica had made: cheap tile in the kitchen, faux wood flooring upstairs. Superficial changes to a foundation she never built. The listing went live on a Tuesday morning. By that afternoon, Jessica had called me. Not once, 7 times. I didn't answer. But the 8th time, I did. I sat in the sunroom at Riverstone Haven with Anita beside me, her knitting needles clicking softly. I put the phone on speaker. "Mom!" Jessica's voice exploded before I could say a word. "What the hell are you doing? There's a realtor walking through the house. Our house." I let a beat of silence pass. "It's not your house, Jessica," I said calmly. "You can't just kick us out." "I didn't," I replied. "You told me to leave. Remember?" She paused. I could hear her pacing. The sound of heels on tile, maybe the kitchen, maybe the hallway where she used to hang Greg's photo, and then took it down after replacing it with a quote about positive energy. "You're being cruel," she said, voice dropping an octave, trying to sound wounded. I smiled, not bitterly, just with clarity. "Have you ever done anything for me, Jessica, without expecting a receipt?" Silence. Then venom. "I've paid bills. I took care of you when no one else would." "No," I said. "You managed me, like a liability. And now that the account's closed, you're panicking." She cursed, loud, crude, and then hung up. I didn't call back. 2 hours later, Peter called from his kitchen table where he'd just finished signing the property transfer forms into a revocable living trust, my trust. The proceeds from the sale would go directly to it. Jessica's name wasn't on a single line. "That's it," Peter said. "The house is officially protected. No one can touch it." "Not even her?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He chuckled. "Especially not her." Sarah had double-checked every filing, every clause. The moment the documents were recorded, Jessica's illusion of control collapsed. That evening, I received an email from the real estate agent. A cash buyer was ready to move forward. Clean deal, fast closing. The kind of offer that once would have made Jessica giddy, now it meant something different. It meant I had untied the final rope. The house where I raised her. The house where she served me coffee and then weaponized it. The house where I used to think silence kept the peace. It was no longer hers to weaponize. It was no longer mine to mourn. It was just a house. A house I was letting go so I could finally return to myself. I wrote a short reply to the agent, accept the offer. Then I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the sky turn the color of a bruise, fading. Not gone, not healed, but softer, distant. An hour later, a text from Sarah appeared. Jessica's attorney just called. She didn't realize she never had ownership. She thought the refinance gave her legal rights. Turns out, she was only borrowing power you never granted. I read the message twice, then whispered to the air. She thought I wouldn't know the difference between surrender and grace. But I did. I always had. The morning air was still cool when I carried my tea into the garden. It was early, too early for most of the residents to be out, but I liked it that way. The hydrangeas were just beginning to open, nodding gently under the soft breeze. In the corner, a robin hopped near the edge of the koi pond, pecking at nothing in particular. I sat on the wrought iron bench under the arbor, the same spot I returned to every morning since I arrived. I brought my chamomile, my notepad, and nothing else. That was the beauty of this place. No one here wanted anything from me. No one waited for me to flinch to agree to hand something over out of guilt. I was just Margaret, or as the staff called me now, Ms. Delaney. A week had passed since the house sold. Since the trust was finalized. Since Sarah confirmed that every account in my name was secure and Jessica's access was permanently revoked. It wasn't vengeance, it was removal. A line drawn not in anger, but in clarity. And then yesterday, something I didn't expect arrived. A letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Slanted, rushed heavy on the right side. Not Jessica's. Braden's. I didn't open it right away. I left it sitting on my desk for hours, sipping tea and listening to the rustle of Anita's knitting needles beside me. She didn't ask what it was. She just said, "When you're ready." I opened it at dusk. There was no money inside, no gift card, no apology twisted into a request. Just 2 pages, handwritten, raw. He told me he was sorry, for the coffee, for the silence, for pretending not to see what he was a part of. He admitted that at first he thought I owed them, that everything I had should be shared because that's what family did. Until he realized that what they were doing wasn't sharing, it was stripping. He ended it simply, "I know it doesn't fix anything. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. You didn't leave us. We left you first." I stared at the page for a long time. Then slowly I tore it in half. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. I saved the second page, the part where he said he saw me. That was enough. The rest I dropped into the small fire pit by the edge of the garden. It caught flame, quickly curling into smoke that rose toward the morning sun. Some apologies, I whispered, only matter when they don't ask for anything in return. Later that week, Anita and I walked to the community library together. She wore her sun hat with the navy ribbon. I carried a folder under my arm. Inside were notes, names, and a title we'd scribbled over coffee just the night before. The Second Act Club. A place for women like us, those who had been told by their own blood that kindness was currency and that survival came with a receipt. We wanted to create space. Not for complaints, not for tears, for rebuilding, for identity, for the sacred quiet right to say, "I'm still here." The director at Riverstone loved the idea, gave us a weekly slot and a room with big windows and a long table. That first meeting, only 3 women came. One used a walker. One had been a teacher. The other hadn't spoken for the first 15 minutes. But when Anita told her story about the power of a forged medical report and the way silence can be used like a scalpel, something changed. We were no longer just women in cardigans with too many pills to remember. We were witnesses. To each other. To ourselves. That night, I returned to my room and pulled out the note card I kept taped beside my lamp. A sentence I wrote the day I walked away from Jessica's house. "You don't owe anyone the right to dim your light, especially not the ones who say they love you while flipping the switch." I read it. Then I smiled. Because it was still true. I turned off the lamp, cracked open the window, and let the night air drift in. No one knocked. No one called. Just the sound of peace. Not because I won, but because I finally fully walked away from the people who thought they had the right to keep me small. And I didn't look back. Not once.